All right, guys. So I want to make sure that you get your FAA license done. That's very important to me. That I know the school year's been disrupted at this point, and I don't know what else we're going to get out of the class, but I do want to make sure that you are able to take your FAA license. Um, that being said, on the FAA classroom, you will find, of course, this lecture. I provided the study guide from the FAA, which I would encourage you to read. And then I gave you a regulation summary, a Part 107 regulation summary. This is the summary of the things that are important for you to know on the exam. And it's a summary that the FAA puts out directly, so it's very valuable to review. And a lot of that stuff is going to be right here in this lecture. All right, so in order to pass the test, you see that these are the percentages of what they ask. Regulation is about 25%. Air and space requirements, you're going to see that those are 8 to 15%. Weather is 11 to 16. Um, Loading and performance is about somewhere between 7 and 11%. That's about how a drone operates, how it works, the avionics of this thing. We'll talk about that. And then operations really focusing on things like airports and stuff like that. Now, you'll probably never be on an airport with your drone, but it's good to know how they operate. If you guys have shot a job with me, we had to clear some space and we were right at the end of a runway. So this stuff is stuff we need to know. Some of the acronyms, and these are in the back of your study guide, the FAA study guide, and look these up. You've got AGL, which would be like at ground level, ATC, air traffic control, okay, CRM, FFA, or that should be, yeah, FFA, MSL, NOTAM, and then a VO, which may not be back there, which is a visual operator or visual observer. I'm sorry. All right, so in order to get your license, you need to be at least 16. So if somebody's not 16, please let me know. You need to be 16 to you need to be able to read, speak, write, and understand English. Um, be a physical and mental condition to fly a drone safely. And of course, you have to be able to pass the initial aeronautical exam, which is 60 questions, and they give you 150 minutes to complete that, which is, I thought, a long time when I took it, but I took most of the time actually, just because I wanted to make sure I did it. All right, so the requirements for remote certificate, you must be able to access your certificate once you have it. So if the FAA ever asks for it, you have it. You need to have that accessible. Interesting fact is, if the police should ask you for your operating license, you don't have to present it. I would, big deal, show the policeman that or whoever the authority is. But really, you only have to go show it to the FAA. It's valid for 2 years. And then you have to take a refresher test, which is like 40 questions. It's the same kind of material. All right, some of the operating limits that we have. Um, a drone is the rule of fives. We've talked about that before. If it's half a pound, and that means half a pound up to 55 pounds, that must be registered. A lot of the toys that we see today, they're less than half a pound. Even our little Trellos that we have are like 0.25, so they don't even have to be registered. So anything beyond, but the Beast has to be registered. My Mavic has to be registered because they're all over that weight limit. 0.55 to 55 pounds. Just remember the rule of fives when it comes to weight. RPICs. RPIC is the remote pilot and control. Um, and then person manipulating controls, the PMC. It has to have visual sight. You always have to be able to see your drone. You operate from your drone, not your camera. Um, I know our cameras are really good on the drones, and sometimes people like to operate from them. That's not what you need to be doing. You need to be doing visual observations and doing that. If you have a visual observer, that helps you spot your drone. Visual observer, their job is primarily should we lose control or contact with the drone and it goes down, they stay in place, spot where that drone went down, and then we go and recover the drone, hopefully. If you lose control of, say, the beast, that would be really bad if we couldn't find that. The first person viewing is not authorized whenever you're operating under the FAA license. I know a lot of you guys like to use those in your racing drones, and that's all well and good. But that's not, just keep in mind when we're operating for money, you don't do that. That's not there. We're not allowed to operate over people, nobody. You never fly over anyone, with the exception being your crew. You can fly over yourself and your crew. Uh, Operational limits. We are allowed to work 30 minutes before sunrise, 30 minutes after sunset, which is civil twilight. So you're allowed to do that. It's just like hunting regulations, exactly the same. Remember, shoot times is 30 minutes pre, 30 minutes after. If you have to, you can look those regulations up. Department of Wildlife always has them. That's where I find them if I need them. So they're easy to look up. Hey, one more thing with that. We are never allowed to operate at night unless we have flashing lights and a waiver. Okay, so I need to make sure I clarify that. You have to have a waiver to do that. And keep in mind that if you apply for a waiver on a job and you have to do it at night, it may take up to 90 days for the FAA to get that back to you. So you have to plan ahead on these kind of things. Operational limits. You're allowed to go at no more than 100 miles an hour or 87 knots. Um, I can't imagine, I had our drone, our beast running as fast as I could straight out, and it was about 35 miles an hour is about the top it got, which was pretty damn fast, really. So I don't think we need to go any faster than that. The maximum altitude is 400 AGL, which on the beast would be very easy. That thing, I think its hard surface capabilities is 900 feet. So we have a maximum altitude of 400 feet. Now that's a maximum altitude at ground level. So if there's like you can see like there's a little bump right here. If you're above that bump, um, 400 feet above that point. This is true about towers. If you're above a tower, you have 400 feet above the top of that tower. So, for example, if you have a 1,200-foot tower, you can fly up to 1,600 feet. Now, that's really high for a drone. I don't even know how you begin to see that. But that is legal. And then you have a 400-foot radius. Remember, if you're operating closer to a tower than that, you need permission from the people that maintenance that tower. As far as operating your drone from a moving vehicle, it is allowed. The thing is, you have to use your pre-flight inspections. Everything's the same. You operate your crew exactly the same. The difference being is the operator of the vehicle, whether it be the boat driver or it be the car driver, they are not part of your crew and they are in charge of that vehicle. You're not in charge of them. So that is the catch there. You can't operate from a moving vehicle, but it has to be under these very specific conditions, and the driver is never part of your crew and he runs his own vehicle. Some of the other limits we have is a person may not use their SUAS if they're not in physical or mental condition to do so. So if somebody shows up on the job drunk or unable to operate mentally, not sound, not safe, not allowed. And that really is something we have to make sure happens. It's a big deal to the FAA. They'll ask you several times about that question. Uh, some of the people we may have on a job is the RPIC, which is a remote pilot and control. That person is a person with the license, and they're in charge of the whole mission. Person manipulating control, that can be somebody else operating. So, for example, if I let somebody fly, I have to be within arm's reach of that controller to take over if I had to. You can also have a buddy drone operator. So we have a buddy system. You can both be on that operating. But remember, the person in charge is always the person with the license. Uh, Visual observers, they should use uh, visual awareness. Keep an eye out for any planes flying through, especially in the spring and summer. In this area where we have the crop dusters, it's nice to have somebody out watching for him to come through. I know I was flying just a few days ago, and one of the planes came through, and he was low enough to be right where my drone was operating. So I had to yield to him because all manned aircraft have the right of way. We never have the right of way ever. And then you can always have your additional visual observer. That person is there to help with anybody that comes up and asks questions, wants to know what's going on. You want to talk to those people. It's nice to have that extra person, especially when we're operating that great big drone. And with you guys being younger, people always want to know what's going on, and it's fine. I mean, we're all legal. We just want to be able to be prepared to deal with that and professional. Your visual observer, when they're operating in a pattern, you can see you move from these different quadrants, looking at 10-degree intervals back and forth, and you want to sweep that continual pattern where you're operating to be sure that you're safe. It's not something I don't think is done very much, but it is a good practice and something we should be doing, especially with our observer techniques. Emergencies and accidents. Now, we must report any accident to the FAA if there's a damage over $500. So if it costs more than $500 to either repair or replace, that has to be reported. So if it's a damage you cause and it costs $200, it doesn't have to be reported. But if it's more than the five, it has to be reported. The other one is any kind of injury. So anybody that ever has to go to the hospital out on a flight, somebody gets hit with a drone, let's say, and it knocks them out, and they end up going to the hospital, it has to be reported. So those are the two things: over $500 and any injury. So those are when we report to the FAA. They will ask you that. You have to know that. In-flight emergencies. We talked about this. You always give the right of way to the manned aircraft. Got to be out of their way. Um, if you have to break a regulation to avoid an emergency, like you have to fly the drone above 400 feet to avoid a collision with an aircraft, then that's fine, and it doesn't have to be reported to the FAA unless they request it. So that's the only time that would happen. So, but don't worry about breaking the law if you have to avoid any injuries. That's always okay. Nobody worries about that. Okay, operational. I want to talk about this operational regulation and how it's done at an airport. Um, the direction on the compass, if we think about how a compass operates, um, is always going to be at the far side. So, for example, if I think about my compass, 12 o'clock would be 0. To my direct right in the compass, or facing to the east, would be 09. Down below 180, 270 to the west, and then down below being, 180 being south. Um, that's always going to be on the far side of the airport. So if you see my airport runway here, um, even though this flying the direction of west, 09 being the coordinates 90 degrees, we always drop that last digit. So that becomes 09. 09 is west. The far side, or would be going east, I'm sorry. And then the opposite direction would be 270, um, which is east. So in this case, the far airport would be 27, dropping that last digit here. So 0927. If we are in a pattern, a flight pattern, the airplanes fly in a pattern, and in this case, the approach being 27, the airport being 27, coming from the east, and they're in a flight pattern, this direction is going to be crosswind. Whenever they're going the opposite direction of the way they're going to land, that's downwind leg. The base leg is the way as they're starting to turn into where they want to go into final approach, and final approach being forward in. You can see this right here is going to be an upwind leg. I got my thing in the way. I'll let that get out of the road. There you go. That's upwind. So anytime we're facing into the direction, upwind, going across, we crosswind leg, downwind leg, base leg, and then of course the direction we're landing is the final approach. Okay, this is a confusing question. If you look in, I'm going to give you later on the most difficult questions that the FAA asks on their exam. They give a really good question on this and how to answer it. If you have any questions on that, I think that'll take care of that. All right, so that's it for this section. This is regulations. I encourage you to go to the Part 107 FAA summaries, review all of them. It's not very long. It's like maybe 2 pages, and they're just little bullets. But all their questions seem to come right out of those regulations. And if you look at the study guide, it's Chapter 1. Regulations are not there. If you really want to see every regulation, which is its own book, I can give that to you. But I like it the summary because it summarizes the things that they will ask you about. All right. If you have to watch the video more than once, please do that. Check out the PowerPoint. Those regulations there, make those readings done. And I'll film another one on the next part being maps, and so we can review the maps. And then I've got some practice tests for you. Do that practice test again and check it out, see how you do. All right, guys. Talk to you later.